before you, I am probably going to disappoint you when I tell you that some places we really don't know how much rain we're going to get. Um, but just a quick overview kind of where we are in terms of drought and what the outlook is for the spring and then into the summer. So where are we now? Well, we actually are seeing pretty serious and widespread drought over much of Nevada. Nearly a quarter of the state is in D4 or exceptional, that sort of worst drought category. And actually just over 99% of the state is in drought. You can see there's a tiny little bit of abnormally dry up here by the Idaho border. I doubt this comes as a surprise to anyone at this point. I will say as well, though, that some of our neighboring states where we get water, Colorado, so for those of you getting water out of the Colorado Basin and the Sierra, they're not really in much better shape either right now. You know, in terms of reservoir storage, you can see here's Nevada right here. We're a bit below where we would normally be for this time of year, but this doesn't reflect every reservoir. Actually, if we look at Lake Tahoe and the Wild Horse Reservoir, they're just about where we would normally expect them to be. Now, looking west-wide, snowpack is kind of above normal if we get up to Washington and Montana, but below normal south of Northern California, Northern Nevada. And zooming right in here on Nevada as of a couple days ago, if you were in the northeast part of the state, your snowpack was right about where you'd normally expect it to be. As you went south from the lower Humboldt and the northern Great Basin, of course, the snowpack conditions are less good. Down in the Walker, we're at less than half of the snowpack we'd expect for this time of year. Well, how did we get here? So March 31st, 2020, this is the Drought Monitor at kind of the end of the last wet season. We had about half of the state.
We're going to move back to Dr. McAfee, and we're going to ask her to pick up where she left off. She's joined us on the telephone. We had a complete internet crash, and so we are going to try and do this here in the control room and try to make it seamless. So, Steph, you are on the phone as I understand. Can you speak up and let's make sure that we can hear you?
Hi, I am on the phone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. So I am going to turn it over to you right now. So go right ahead.
All right. So Stacy just let me know that we are on slide 6. So picking up where I left off, of course, if you're in the northeast part of the state, your snowpack's looking good. If you're further south or further east, the snowpack is not where we'd expect to see it at this time of year. And moving to the next slide, I want to talk briefly about how we got here. So to slide 8. Here is the drought monitor from the end of last winter, March of 2020. You know, we did have some dry conditions across the state, abnormally dry and moderate drought in north central. This is not great. It's not actually terrible or particularly odd for Nevada. And if you were in Clark or southern Lincoln County, you actually ended the winter with more than your normal amount of rain and snow. But as you'll see on the next slide, drought started developing in the spring and summer. So here's just a snapshot of the percent of normal June through September precipitation for this year. And you can see that the southern and in particular the southeast part of the state got less than 20% of its normal precipitation. Now, in some places, it was actually much less than 20%. Just an interesting stat on the next slide. McCarran International Airport in Las Vegas recorded 240 days without rain between late April and mid-December. No rain at the airport at all. Now, the longest previous dry spell was back in 1959. That was 150 days. So, yes, Las Vegas is dry, but 240 days with no rain is odd even there. On top of that, if you move on to the next slide, you can see, and I know this is going to be a surprise for everyone, our summer and early fall were really hot. Here you can see all that red shading over Nevada. It was 1, 2, 3, 4, as much as 5 degrees warmer than normal. And if we were focusing in just on August or September, some of those numbers would be even higher. Okay, so summer was hot and dry. Now, unfortunately, you'll see on the next slide that warm, dry conditions continued into the fall. So normally, come October, November, certainly into December, we'd expect it to start to cool off. Yet, as you can see on the right, over much of Nevada, it remained 2 or 3 degrees above normal. We'd also expect to start getting those first rain and snowstorms of the winter, and across much of the state, those didn't happen. You can again see that dark red color in southern Nevada, less than 20% of the rain you would normally expect. Right? The northeastern part of the state did a little better. It was actually close to normal precipitation in that area. So if we look at a whole, just on the next slide, these numbers just came out in the last week or so, is that statewide, 2020 was the driest year on record for Nevada, and these records go back to about 1895. It was also the 4th warmest year on record. Now that, of course, is a statewide average. If we look at the next slide, you can see the county snapshots, and of course, right, your mileage may vary. And even within the county, your particular place may have been not quite so dry, or maybe even a little bit drier than these numbers would suggest. But so overall, we're seeing really 2020 was a hot, dry year. The summer and spring were particularly hot and dry, and that's how we got into this particularly bad drought. So let's move on to what we can expect coming into the future. Now, as Dr. Nyberg noted, moving on to the next slide, La Nina conditions currently prevail, right? So this is about sea surface temperature in the tropical Pacific. And normally when there is a La Nina, we expect wetter conditions in the Pacific Northwest. You can see that in all of these different little snapshots of past La Ninas, right? Those green colors in Washington and Oregon. It's usually drier than normal in the Southwest. So those brown colors that you're seeing over California, Arizona, and often southern Nevada, right? So with a La Nina winter in store, we typically expect drier in the southern part of the state. In the northern part of the state, La Nina winters can be wet, dry, warm, cool, pretty much anywhere in between. And you'll see that on the next slide in the seasonal forecast from the Climate Prediction Center. So you can see on the left is the precipitation outlook. You can see those browns moving towards the southwest. That's indicating higher than normal chances of a dry winter, okay? Whereas the white color in the northern part of Nevada is equal chances, so equally likely to be normal, wet, or dry. On the right, you can see temperature there, again with those orange colors, indicating increased chances that it might be warmer than normal for January, February, and March. Again, the white colors saying, hey, this is an area where the forecast isn't giving us very much guidance. And in fact, if you kind of drill down into a couple of the major locations on the next slide, there's a new tool now looking at the interactive predictions that can actually let you see the breakdown of the forecast and not just that map. And that's what I've pulled here. So I would say in the northern part of the state, it's kind of Nevada weather rules. Be prepared for anything. It's about equally likely that we would have, on the left is our precip, about equally likely that we would have dry conditions in the brown, green, wet, or the white normal conditions. It's also equally likely that in the next 3 months it might be near normal temperatures, warmer than normal, or cooler than normal temperatures. Again, I know this is not that helpful. Now, if you're in Las Vegas, southern parts of Nevada, a relatively cooler wet winter is pretty unlikely owing to that La Nina. You can see we've got almost a 50% chance that it's going to be drier than normal, and only a 21% chance that it's going to be wetter than normal. Likewise for the temperature, right? We're looking at a 46% chance of a warmer than normal winter into early spring. What this means for drought, as you'll see on the next slide, is that we expect drought to continue into the spring throughout most of the state, pretty much anywhere you're seeing that brown color. So you can actually see we're looking at drought over a big portion of the western U.S. that we expect to continue into the spring. This year's very first water supply outlook just became available on January 1. And as of today, the forecast for April through July water supply are running a little lower than average for most of the gauging points in Nevada. So you can see where there's that black line with the number highlighted. That is it's the 50% exceedance forecast, right? So 50% chance that flows will be lower than that, 50% chance that it'll be higher. You can see that for everything except the west fork of the Carson, about 4 down from the top, that number is lower than the gray line, which is the average. So this is just suggesting probably water supply right now, best guess is that it's running a little lower than normal. So what does this mean? I really don't think this is a surprise, but if you haven't already started thinking about the potential for spring and summer drought, let's make sure that's on your radar. The summer was particularly hot and dry, and we're behind on our winter wet up, right? That means that even if it gets cool and wet throughout the rest of the winter, we're kind of in the hole, and so we have a moisture backlog to make up. And when we look at the seasonal forecast, it's not encouraging. We're not seeing strong indications of having a nice wet spring. Now, so it seems pretty likely to me and to most other climatologists that we're probably looking at drought into the spring, possibly persisting into the summer, unless we get a streak of good luck. And so it's always a little awkward doing this over the phone. It's even worse than regular Zoom. But so the bottom line here is just that we got into a drought over the summer. Neither the fall nor the early part of the winter have improved conditions very much. And so we've only got a few more months for conditions to improve. And so I don't know if you have any questions, but I did try to go quickly through this so we could stay on time.
No, Steph, that's great. And I haven't gotten any questions for you, but I have one that I'll throw at you while Robert begins to queue up Wade Small, I think, is our next speaker. The drought monitor, obviously, that's been one of the issues with the drought monitor in Nevada over the years is it really only tells us something about surface water. And so you can have a really bad surface water drought monitor year, and you can have one of the best forage years that we've seen in 20 years. And so one of the things that seems to us, and we've done a little bit of work with it, that relates to periodicity of precipitation is the Pacific Decadal Oscillation. And it seems as though certainly recruitment of rangeland plants and necessarily from that production in any given year is much more correlated to what, to the phase, at least for a long-term plan or for a 10-year plan anyway, it's much more correlated to the Pacific Decadal Oscillation phase. And so do you know off the top of your head where we are in that PDO phase and what we might be seeing the next couple of years?
Well, so I will preface this by saying that some early analyses with the PDO did suggest it was going to be a useful forecast tool for the western U.S., but more recently, over the last 5 or so years, we've really come to see that the relationship between the PDO and weather, so the things that would be driving that forest production, are actually pretty variable over time. So I would be a little concerned, a little hesitant about using the PDO as a forecast tool.
Okay.
I will say there are a couple places where the PDO works pretty well. If you're on Vancouver Island, maybe some parts of southeast and south central Alaska, then it's pretty reliable. As you kind of move into Nevada in particular, it's probably not as reliable a predictor.
Just a little dirty, yeah.
Yeah, and some of that actually has to do with just some quirks of statistics, but some of it has to do with the fact that, well,
the rain shadow has a lot to do with it. I'm quite certain. So, but
you know what I will say though is one of the reasons I think you're thinking back to the summer of, I believe it was 2015, where we saw a real disconnect between the hydrology and the range conditions in parts of Nevada.
That was one of them, yeah.
Yeah, and so one of the reasons we saw that, and this is something that the Drought Monitor has been working on improving, is that there was for a while the thought that in the West, where the summers are normally dry, drought should get kind of baked in, right, at the end of the spring. Since that time, and 2015 had a lot to do with this, people have revised their opinions and are now paying a lot more attention to abnormally wet conditions during the summer, and taking into account, right, the fact that if you have a nice wet June, if it rains into July, you can get some really nice forage conditions in northern Nevada.
Right.
And so the Drought Monitor is more responsive to that now than it used to be.
That's good news. That's good news.
Right?
I had a quick question here about what is a rain shadow. The rain shadow would be the Sierra Nevada not allowing storm fronts to come over, and they lose a lot of moisture as they go over the top of the mountain, and as the air comes down in elevation, it warms up, and so it can hold water better. And so usually on the backside or the leeward side of mountain ranges, you have a rain shadow effect where there's less rain, less precipitation in that affected area. So okay, I want to thank Steph. We appreciate it. Sorry about the technical difficulties, but it worked out pretty well.